Rain lashed against the windows, each drop a tiny hammer against the silence of the house. The rhythmic patter created a soothing yet melancholic symphony, a stark contrast to the stillness inside. Inside the living room was a pool of warm light, the only sounds the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the crackling of the fireplace. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, adding a touch of magic to the otherwise mundane evening. Jay, sprawled on the couch, scrolled through his phone, the blue light reflecting in his tired eyes. His fingers moved lazily, swiping through social media posts and news articles, searching for something to hold his interest. He was home alone tonight, his parents out for a dinner party, leaving him to his own devices. The house felt emptier than usual, the silence almost oppressive in their absence. He glanced at the clock, 9:47 p.m., and sighed. Time seemed to crawl, each minute stretching into an eternity. Another Friday night scrolling through endless memes and videos, a dull ache of boredom settling in his chest. He longed for something more, a spark of excitement to break the monotony. A sudden noise, a soft thump from upstairs sliced through the quiet. It was so unexpected that it sent a jolt of adrenaline through his veins. Jay froze, his head snapping up, eyes darting towards the ceiling. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing in the silence. He listened intently, holding his breath, but the sound wasn't repeated. The house seemed to hold its breath with him, waiting. Probably just the house settling, he thought, trying to calm his racing heart. He took a deep breath, willing himself to relax. He went back to his phone, but the previous easy boredom was gone, replaced by a prickle of unease on the back of his neck. Every creak and groan of the old house seemed amplified, each one making him jump. Jay found himself staring out the window, watching the rain. The outside world seemed so distant, a blur of shadows and water. He wondered if his parents were having a good time, if they missed him at all. Deciding he needed a distraction, he got up from the couch and headed to the kitchen. Maybe a snack would help take his mind off the eerie quiet. He opened the fridge, the cold air a welcome change from the warmth of the living room. He scanned the shelves, looking for something that might satisfy his restless energy. Settling on a simple sandwich, he began to prepare it, the familiar routine bringing a sense of normalcy. The act of making food, however mundane, was a comfort in the unsettling quiet of the night. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching out, filled with the whisper of the wind against the windows, creating an almost melodic yet unsettling tune. The rhythmic tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hallway added to the eerie atmosphere, each swing of the pendulum echoing through the silent house. Just as Jay began to relax again, the sound came again, more insistent this time, breaking the fragile calm he had managed to find. This time it was more distinct, a scraping sound, like furniture being dragged across the wooden floor above him, sending chills down his spine. He sat up straighter, his phone forgotten in his lap, the screen dimming as it slipped from his grasp. His heart pounded against his ribs, a drum beat of fear against his bones, each thud echoing louder in the silence. He called out tentatively, "Hello? Is anyone there?" His voice barely more than a whisper, trembling with uncertainty. His voice sounded thin and weak, even to his own ears, swallowed by the oppressive silence that filled the room. Silence met his question, heavy and absolute, as if the house itself was holding its breath. He listened for another minute, but the only sound was the relentless drumming of the rain against the windows, a constant reminder of the storm outside. He told himself it was nothing, just his imagination playing tricks on him in the quiet house, but the doubt lingered. But deep down, a knot of fear tightened in his stomach, a primal instinct warning him of unseen dangers. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that he was not alone in the house, and that whatever was there was watching him. He couldn't stay on the couch, pretending not to be scared. He needed to see for himself, make sure there wasn't an intruder lurking in the shadows. He grabbed the baseball bat his dad kept propped up beside the bookcase, its familiar weight strangely comforting in his hand. Taking a deep breath, he pushed himself off the couch and moved towards the hallway, his footsteps slow and deliberate on the hardwood floor. The hallway was dark, the only light spilling in from the living room behind him. He flipped the switch, but nothing happened. "Great," he muttered. "Just what I need, a power outage." He continued down the hallway, his heart hammering in his chest, each creak of the floorboards sounding like footsteps behind him. Reaching the foot of the stairs, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his hand shaking slightly. and saw a message from an unknown number. It read simply, "Don't go upstairs." A shiver ran down his spine. His finger hovered over the screen, his mind racing. Who would send him a message like that? And how did they know he was about to go upstairs? He glanced back at the living room, bathed in the warm glow of the fireplace, and then back at the dark, silent staircase. He had to know. He took a deep breath and started up the stairs, his hand gripping the baseball bat tighter. The steps creaked under his weight, each one echoing in the silence. He reached the top of the stairs and strained his ears, listening for any sound. The scraping sound came again, this time from his parents' bedroom at the end of the hallway. His blood ran cold. Someone was definitely in the house. He crept down the hallway, his shadow stretching out before him, a distorted mirror image of his fear. As he neared his parents' room, he heard a muffled thump, like something heavy falling to the floor. He raised the baseball bat, his heart pounding in his ears, and threw open the door. The room was empty. Confusion washed over him. He could have sworn he heard something in here. He scanned the room, his eyes adjusting to the darkness, but there was nothing out of place. His gaze landed on the closet door, slightly ajar. He took a step closer, his grip tightening on the baseball bat. He could hear his own breathing, harsh and ragged in the silence. He reached out and flung the closet door open, expecting to find, what, an intruder, a monster, but the closet was empty. Clothes hung neatly on hangers, shoes lined up on the floor. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. He felt a surge of relief, followed by a wave of dizziness. He was just letting his imagination run wild. He was being ridiculous. Just as he turned to leave, the lights went out. The sudden darkness was absolute, suffocating. He froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. He couldn't see anything, couldn't even see his hand in front of his face. He stumbled back, bumping into something hard, and cried out in alarm. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers shaking so badly it took him several tries to unlock it. He finally managed to turn on the flashlight, the beam of light, a beacon in the overwhelming darkness. He shone the light around the room, his heart still pounding. He was right, he had backed into his parents' dresser. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He needed to get downstairs, call for help. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. As he turned to leave the room, the beam of his flashlight fell on the doorway. A figure stood silhouetted against the faint light coming from the hallway. He froze, his blood turning to ice in his veins. The figure was tall and slender, just like him, and it was wearing clothes that looked eerily familiar. His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. It couldn't be. The figure took a step into the room, and the light from the hallway illuminated its face. Jay's breath caught in his throat, a strangled gasp escaping his lips. It was him. Standing in the doorway was his exact double, his doppelganger, staring back at him with an unreadable expression on his face. Who are you?" Jay's voice trembled, barely audible in the oppressive darkness. Jay stammered, his voice barely a whisper, his breath catching in his throat. The figure didn't answer, just kept staring at him, a strange, unsettling smile playing on his lips. It was as if the figure was enjoying Jay's fear, feeding off his terror. Jay's hand trembled, the beam of the flashlight wavering, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. Each shadow seemed to twist and writhe, creating monstrous shapes that danced in the periphery of his vision. He felt a chill run down his spine, a primal fear he had never experienced before. His skin prickled with goosebumps, and his heart pounded in his chest like a drum. The air crackled with an unseen energy, a sense of wrongness that seemed to seep from the very walls. It was as if the house itself was alive, watching him, waiting for something. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he was in terrible danger. The kind of danger that one doesn't escape from easily, if at all. His phone buzzed again in his hand, the vibration feeling like a lifeline in the overwhelming darkness. He looked down at the screen, his blood turning to ice. The message was from the same unknown number that had been haunting him for days. The message from the same unknown number simply read, "You should be more careful about who you let in." The words seemed to echo in his mind, each letter a nail in his coffin. He slowly raised his head, but the figure, his doppelganger, was gone. The sudden absence was almost as terrifying as its presence. The hallway was empty, the only sound the hammering of his own heart in the suffocating silence. He was alone, but the sense of being watched lingered, an invisible weight pressing down on him.